Okay, so the BC Racing Coilovers, what do I really like about them? Well, first off, I really like the adjustment of height. So this is an adjustable body shock, which basically means that I'm able to adjust the body, shorten the body, without sacrificing the shock stroke. That's really important when you're lowering the car with coilovers. So technical things with the BC Racing coilover, so I was able to get 1.5 inches lowering all around the car. Okay guys, we are outside of the car, so I'm just gonna show off the ride or the stance of the car. So as you can see, the rear is sitting on a 325/25/20 in the rear, and in the front I'm on a 275/30/19. Okay, there we go. So there is the front, absolutely no wheel gap, no nothing. So really great fitment and really great stance with these coilovers. I'm super happy with the way that the car sits. So to me, the ride height, everything like that, it looks super fantastic, guys. Really good. So I essentially went with about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches drop all around. Really nice. I'm really happy with that from the adjustment that the BC Racing coilovers give. That's pretty decent in my opinion. One thing that I have to say was the front springs, I believe, are 7 inches. The ones in the rear are 6 inches from BC Racing. The rear is substantially easier to get lower. I can go from about 2.5 inches lower than stock. In the front, I'm pretty much stuck at, 1.5 inches. Unless if you remove like the collars and stuff, you could probably get the car a little bit lower, get another 1/2 inch. Maybe you could get to 1 3/4 or 2 inches lower than stock, but you shouldn't be doing that anyway. That's too low. So ideally you can get 1 inch to 1.5 inches. The springs, I think they're too short in the back. My preference would be to run the largest spring that you can all around. So I opted to put Swiss springs on all 4 corners. I stuck with the 392s up front, that's pounds or 7 kilograms. In the rear, I opted to go a little bit softer because I didn't think that the valving matched the stiffer spring because there was so much bounce in the rear. So I went from a 10 kilogram to a 9. So that's about 560 to 520, I want to say. I don't know. And that really helped the ride quality. It really helped the bounce on the car. To me, that was a better matched spring. Is it too soft? It is a little bit on the soft side all around the car. 392 and 520, 530, whatever it is. It's just, I'm not going to say that it's undersprung, but it is undersprung for autocrossing. And it is undersprung for track driving. Okay? But around town, it's pretty good. So, yeah. So, ride quality. Is ride quality better than the stock? No, I really don't think so. The leaf spring, in my opinion, is, it doesn't ride super well either, okay? There's kind of like this weird thing going on in the rear with the stock leaf springs, which kind of scared me if you were driving the car fast. It felt very vague, and it felt very bouncy over large bumps. So what I opted to do, that was the main reason and the main motivation for me to do a coilover setup. I've done coilovers in every single one of my cars. I did try doing lowering bolts on the car, but I just scrapped the idea. I was just straight to coilovers. Just be done with it. Which brings me to the question is, what do you do with your car? So if you're gonna just do street driving, my recommendation is just stay away from coilovers. If you are doing track driving or autocrossing, then yeah, you are gonna look towards either getting better shocks for the leaf setup or getting coilovers ideally and bigger front bars, anti-roll bars. I'm running a Ridetech muscle bar, which is similar to the Fat. I think it's like a 32 millimeter bar up front. It's huge and it's very good quality. I highly recommend it. Really helps stiffen up the rear. I'm still running the stock one in the rear because I think that that's a better match for me. It keeps the car more neutral and kind of gives a little bit of a safety net for understeer. Okay, so BC Racing Coilovers. So I guess these are DS type, so I guess they keep changing the name, but yeah, so there you go. Autofocus. Yeah, anyways, okay, so there's the little brochure stuff. So digressive shocks. Why did I go with the digressive version of the BC Racing? Well, in my experience, I really like the way that KWs and Bilsteins really feel on the road. There's a certain amount of plushness that you get with having a lot more damping control at lower speeds. When you look at the linear version of the BC Racing, they're $995, $1,000. We'll just call it at that. So what does that mean? BC Racing, you know, they make two versions for the C6 Corvette. What are those versions? Well, they are either the digressive version or the linear valved version. Okay, what's the difference between digressive and linear? Well, linear is essentially linear. So it means that as the shock travels faster, the wheels, you know, move up and down, shock stroke goes faster and faster. You end up with more damping increase. So you can think of it as 0 wheel speed and then, you know, a lot higher wheel speed, you know, going up and down. Or the shock speed, sorry. Okay, and then digressive basically means that at the beginning, there's going to be like this. So there's a lot more damping at the beginning of the shock stroke. And then later on, as the shock travels faster and faster, it relies more on the spring to compensate. So basically that means that at higher speeds, there's less damping. To me, this is not where the BC Racing shines. Okay, there's not enough damping on the rear at higher speeds, which is really sad. You know, one of the worst things about BC Racing is going to be the bleed over of compression into the rebound adjustment. Basically, this means that once you try and tighten that 30 adjustment click, which is way too many, you know, you need like at least like 5 adjustments to just try and get a different feeling out of the car. But I digress. Let's continue on with that. Okay, when you adjust it, it basically means that at certain points the compression is being affected. So say you want more rebound control or body control, you know, you're going to turn it up stiffer, but basically that means that the compression is getting higher and higher as well. So what does that mean? It means that the wheel is being resisted during bumps. So, you know, think you're trying to go over a bump, basically the compression is just going to go like that. Whereas if you have a proper compression control, the shock's going to want to go up and the wheel's going to want to go up to compensate for that bump. You know, you can get really, really nasty ride quality if you have too much compression, or if you have too much rebound for that matter. So what does that all mean? It means that I was able to dial in the front correctly, okay? Even after the spring change with the Swift springs, or even before that, I was able to get the front end pretty dialed in for the most part. But the rear end, I still can't get dialed in for the most part. At higher speeds, the bounce in the rear is just, it's just too much in my opinion. So, you know, if I'm going on the freeway 65, 70 miles an hour, I hit a bump in the road, it feels like the car wants to go like that, you know. The front stays in place, but the rear just, it just budges too much. I've tried all kinds of different settings, you know. This is just an inherent quality that there's just not enough rebound, and when you try and stiffen it up, the compression goes with it, and it just becomes just too stiff at that point. So that's one of my gripes with it. Also, okay, so one of the reliability issues that I had with the BC Racing Coilover was this shock mount. So what is the shock mount? Well, it's a monoball mount on the upper shock. I had this go out in the first 200 miles of installation. So I was driving the car and the rattle started getting more and more pronounced after 200 miles. Basically what happened is that the monoball inside the cup, somehow it just wasn't seated correctly at the factory. So when the wheel would go up into the wheel well, you know, you had the shock stroke going on. Basically this would be clanking around because there was play up and down on this monoball. I tried to get in contact with BC Racing about this to try and warranty it, gave them all the receipts from where I bought it, and I thought that the product warranty would be okay, but for whatever reason I just never really got an answer from them. I sent them all the receipts, all the stuff that they asked for, and they just never got back to me afterwards. So really didn't like that about BC Racing, but I digress. These are just things of huge companies, I guess. You know, what can you do? Would I recommend the BC Racing coilovers for the Corvette? No, I don't think I would. And here's why. Okay, it's not because of the reliability issue that I had with it. That is just, you know, one of those things. It happens. I'm not going to say that's a huge deal. I wish they would have handled it better, but like I said, not a huge deal in my opinion. Okay, what is a huge deal is just the ride quality and the spring setup. And just the damping control on BC Racing coilovers, even on these DRDS, whatever they call them, it's just not, it's not quality. It doesn't feel like a KW, it doesn't feel like a Coney, and it doesn't feel like a Bilstein. You know, there's a certain amount of plushness that you get with running one of those shocks. If you've never been in one, I really recommend that you find a car that has a set of really nice coilovers, because when the valving is matched to the spring rate on these non-adjustable coilovers, it is just sublime. You know, the car just feels so controlled, and it feels so good to just be in the car. Even going over rough pavement, you know, the car doesn't want to bounce around. You're not messing with 30 clicks of adjustment, etc., etc. Which brings me on to that 30 adjustment click thing. Okay, there's really only, I want to say, 10 clicks, you know, after, well, if you go set it on the hardest setting, you know, to 10 clicks outwards, that's really your only adjustment. I don't know why they have so many clicks afterwards. Basically, you know, factory setting is 8 all around from full stiff, but I think I'm running 7 in the back, and I believe I'm running about 8 in the front. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might be 6 in the back. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the bleed over problem and just, you know, so many clicks, you know, to me 30 clicks is just 30 ways to get it wrong. You know, that's not how statistics work, but you know what I mean. Okay, so to me that is just poor design. You know, a lot of cheap coilovers are like that. But you say, oh, well, you can switch different springs on and stuff and do different spring rates. Well, you really can't. There's only really a certain amount of room that you have with the valving on the shocks themselves. So really you can only go like plus or minus 50 pounds, I want to say, without having to get them revalved. Yes, BC Racing does revalve them, but most aftermarket places don't want to touch them, especially some of the local shock builders around here. They didn't want to touch the BCs to revalve them or even do anything with them. I believe there is a website online that will put Bilstein internals on BC Racing coilovers, but why not just start with Bilsteins in the first place, okay? There are many ways to lower Corvettes. You know, the BC Racing coilover is just one option. You know, going from cheapest to most expensive, you're going to do lowering bolts, and ideally you would do new shocks. Doug Rippie Motorsports shocks are a great option. I've been in those cars that have them, and it is really nice. Another option would be going up to coilovers. My personal opinion would just be skip over BC Racing. Sorry, I know there's a lot of BC fans and a lot of BC hot boys. You know, this is just really a stancy coilover. The Digressive version is functional, but there is better to be had. I would just go straight to the LG Motorsports GT2 coilovers, you know, and I would run different springs on them, better quality springs. Those are great coilovers for the price, and the control from the rebound damping is just, it's marginally better than it is in the BC Racing counterpart. But the best coilover setup that I ever felt in a Corvette would be the Bilsteins from either Doug Rippie Motorsports or LG Motorsports. I'm partial to the LG Motorsports ones because they're my favorite. I do kind of wish that I just went and spent the extra money to get those instead, but I didn't, so yeah. So with that, I hope that was helpful if you guys are looking for BC Racing coilovers. Look, if you want them, you know, they are a viable option. Is there better? There's always going to be better. My recommendation to you is, what do you do with your car? Do you just street drive it? Don't even bother with coilovers. No reason to. Lowering bolts, shocks, be done. If you do a lot of spirited driving, look at a coilover option. Look at some Bilstein's KWs for this car. Those are really great options to be had. Otherwise, you know, maybe you just, you know, want to spend the money, you know, go for it. But if you're a stancy hot boy, BC Racing is going to lower your car. So, yeah. Hope that was helpful.